WarioWare!
WarioWare is a somewhat niche Nintendo franchise primarily focusing on completing quick microgames. A lot of them focus on your reflexes and general reaction time. The games don't really tend to be that hard, so to speak, compared to some other stuff, but I think it still raises a quite interesting question of which one is even the hardest in some of these games. In this video, I'll be talking specifically about WarioWare Move It, the most recent game in the franchise that came out about 2 years ago in 2023. That being said, as I did say, these games do tend to be really easy, so I don't think anything here is impossible, so to speak. This feels more like comparing every bug catcher fight in Pokemon to find the hardest, when in reality, like, I don't know, Cynthia or Kieran would probably just smash any single one of them. I do want to put 3 little self-imposed rules in place just for ranking these, which I'll go over right now. My first rule is that I won't be using boss stages. For someone who's never played WarioWare, boss stages happen every couple stages after you've gone through, say, 10 to 20, where you'll complete a much more complicated stage with a different objective compared to the more simple ones that the usual games provide. These are generally a bit more complicated, and I think it'd be just more fair to rank those individually rather than trying to shove them in with all the other micro games. The second rule is that I'm going to be considering that motion controls completely work and that those aren't a barrier to the micro games being actually playable. For example, I know a lot of the head model games will sometimes be a bit janky and work weird, or just in general, sometimes the motion controls can screw you up. For this, we're under the assumption that they work completely normally, and that this is just based off of objectively, at least to the best of my ability, because I think it will always be a bit subjective, kind of just which is the hardest in general. And lastly, I will be only considering these micro games at level 1. For those who don't know, whenever you're playing WarioWare stages, once you get through the first boss stage, every level before that is level 1 of the micro game, and then after that they get a bit tougher, going to level 2, and then after the second time you beat a boss stage, they end up going to level 3. So I'll only be considering them before you technically get to the first boss, and while they're still at that base level. So in order to decide which one's the hardest, I'll be going through every single stage, excluding remixes and stuff, picking out the hardest, giving some honorable mentions and runner-ups, and then finally ranking every single one of those stages until we reach what I would nominate as the hardest. So I guess we'll get started since there's not much else to talk about. For Wario, I would personally nominate the hardest as The Way I Like It. This is a coffee micro game. Believe it or not, these actually have names. This one, you just pour coffee into a cup and you have to read a little sign and just put it in accordingly. I think this one just tends to be a bit tricky since it requires a bit more green juices, and I haven't found myself messing up on it just because I forget to read, or I mess it up on accident, or I pour the wrong thing. So that's why I personally say that one's the toughest. As for any runner-ups, I personally give it to Bell Chorus. This one, I find a lot of people mess it up the first time they play it just because it's a bit confusing the way it's read out. A lot of people just think you just ring the bells when in reality you're kind of meant to sync them up properly with the actual bells that show up. Same with Stony Look. That one's kind of easy once you realize you could just go fast and then slow down. You know, it's just like a Medusa game. You know, you go and then you stop, you go, you stop. And then I also am just thinking this is a bit off of my script, but I think the train one's a bit tricky as well. I don't think it's as challenging as The Way I Like It, since I find I choke up on that one a lot more. But that one can definitely mess you up. So I think, in my opinion, the hardest of the Wario ones is The Way I Like It. In my opinion, I actually think Mona's microgames are a bit easier than Wario's. I personally see the hardest is Helping Hands. In this one, you kind of have to flail your arms around and grab onto 2 hands to be pulled out of a cave, except there's like snakes and stuff trying to also reach out for you, and if you hit one, you lose. I think this one's just a bit challenging because sometimes they can mess you up, and, you know, sometimes the hand you won't grab till the last second. And in my opinion, I think the only runner-up for this one would be I Spyglass. In this one, you just hold up a telescope and you have to look for an airplane and just track it for a few seconds. But overall, I don't think Mona's microgames are really that hard. Definitely not really. I actually think the boss stage is a little brutal for this early in the game, but that would be for a different topic for another day if I ever were to talk about the boss stages. In my opinion, for Penny, Crygor, and Mike, I think the hardest is probably Pure Waddle with the penguins. It's just kind of tricky in general with the motion controls and just figuring out how to, like, waddle in general. I feel like I mess that one up a lot. It gets even trickier with the harder levels too, since they add, like, something to jump over in the harder ones, but even level 1 sometimes I'll mess up. As for my runner-ups, I would give that to Light 'em Up. This is one where you have to shine the light on like a Frankenstein. I found myself messing up on that one before just because I'll get, you know, like, it's just kind of tricky to like line it up sometimes and I'll just get it wrong on accident. Sometimes Deep Fryer is a bit tricky as well. Like, I'll do it wrongly or I'll mess up on the I'm pulling hard enough to get like the little like sausage thing out. But in my opinion, I think Pure Waddle is definitely the hardest one, and there's not really much of a competition. I think another no competition one would be Ashley, and I'd personally give it to Caught in the Act. In this one, you have to catch an egg that drops, but you have to be really, really, really careful about catching it, since if you go too quickly, you end up actually cracking the egg. So I find that I always struggle a little bit with actually getting like the egg in my hands to catch it. I always end up breaking it on accident. And I think the runner-up will probably be Gas Guzzler. This one just requires good reaction time to pull out the gas at the right time. But I think compared to some of the other micro games, it's kind of harder to practice some of these. I think Caught in the Act is just kind of tricky to like perfect, in my opinion. I think that's why I definitely would give that one the hardest for her. In my opinion, the hardest of the Orbulon micro games is teeter trays. In this one, you have to hold up like trays from dropping them. I find that I mess up on this one a lot as well. It's just kind of tricky to get them, and like they're very, very, very sensitive to the motion control. So if you kind of mess up, they fall very, very easily. This one always usually messes me up whenever I get it. My honorable mention will probably be Fairweather Friend. In this one, you are a chicken and you have to align yourself with the wind, but I find that sometimes the wind's a bit tricky to either get to, or sometimes like you'll turn and it won't turn properly. I know I said I wouldn't qualify motion controls for how hard I think these are, but so I really won't be considering that. But in general, I think sometimes the wind's a bit tricky to like nail. But if you can get the hang of it, it's not that bad. As I said, none of these games are really like that hard, so to speak. It's just, you know, amongst each other, there's definitely some easier and some hard ones. In my opinion, the hardest for Kat and Anna would probably be Cake Flower. In this one, you look at a girl and she has a bunch of decorations on like a cake, and then they ask you how many of a certain item on the cake there was. I think this one's just a bit tricky since it asks you for a lot to like kind of read and then have to pick one so quickly. And then I think runner-ups would be, I have two. I would say the Cat's Meow. This one you have to look for a cat based off, I think it kind of like rumbles your controller a bit, and you kind of have to turn your head to find a cat. Sometimes it's kind of tricky to actually find it. And the other one would be Curling Champ. I've messed up on this one a few times and I kind of had to practice it. So in my opinion, having to practice any of these micro games does make them a bit trickier, but once you get the hang of it, it's not that bad. And I think other ones like Cat's Meow or Flower Cake are more deserving of this since you can't really practice those. For Young Cricket and Master Mantis, I think it's Press the Advantage, and I don't really think there's much of a competition. This one's like tricky. Like if you never pressed a flower on a book, then this one you just have no idea what you're doing. Like I had to look it up online to figure out how to even like beat this one. And I was like, oh, that's not bad. Well, like once you learn it, it's really, really easy. But I think the fact that you have to research it, I mean, granted, if you know how to do it, you're probably like, damn, like that's embarrassing. But I guess for that, like if you need to like search up how to complete a micro game, considering they generally tend to be pretty intuitive to play, I think that makes it a bit tricky. Although as for runner-ups, I honestly don't think any deserve them. I think generally the micro games in this stage are pretty easy. I don't know if I'd even nominate any. Like, I think this one has the easiest micro game, and the one where you just have to, like, roll out, like, a scroll. I'll put a clip of that as I'm talking about it, but that one's stupid easy. There's, like, you know, 0 lose conditions, and it's just one little step regardless of what level it is. But, yeah. For Jimmy T, I think the hardest is probably Oscilloscope. And this one, you put your Joy-Cons down and then have to twist them like dials to match a certain wavelength that a screen is projecting. I think this one's a bit tricky to like master and get used to, and it definitely can trip you up the first time you play it, and just in general it may take a couple of tries to like get the hang of it. I think the runner for this one is Don't Get Spotted, and this one you have to like turn ladybugs to match them with the pattern to like kind of blend them in from getting attacked by a bird. In general, I actually think the pounce form micro games tend to be pretty tricky in my opinion. Like, you know, some of them aren't that bad. I think there's another one I'm taking off script right now. There's one with like cards you have to like guess like a card. I think that one's can be pretty tricky too. I don't think it's as bad as Oscilloscope because you could just kind of memorize the cards and do it from that, whereas the Oscilloscope is kind of just like boom out of nowhere, if that makes any sense. In my opinion, I actually think Dribble and Spitz have like the hardest micro games on average. They tend to be pretty hard. All of these use button controls, and they use the forms from before, since by this point you will have used all of them for the game. But they tend to be pretty tricky in my opinion. There's a lot of pretty tough ones here that it was kind of hard to pick a hardest one, but I think I'm gonna give it to Air Guitarist. This one has you mimicking a guy playing a guitar. I think it just tends to be pretty tricky to like nail it, especially since you have to spend a couple seconds listening to him first before you get to play that. You lose a bit of time. But I mean, granted, the game kind of also makes up for that. But I think this one's pretty tricky to like nail, like playing the guitar with all the button strokes and stuff, and even using motion controls. And I think the runner-up will probably be hit the brake. This one you just have to stop like quickly with a on a bike, otherwise you'll fly off. But I think the time can be pretty hard to nail sometimes. That it can mess you up. It's pretty funny when you fail though. I've failed before, and it's you just kind of just fly off. It's funny. I don't know. For 9 volt, I think all of his micro games are really easy, honestly. Like I know generally his tend to be the Nintendo games, and I don't know if it's more so just like, I guess like a Calm Before the Storm something, but these tend to be really easy in my opinion. Like I don't think any of them are really that hard, especially in this game. I think the hardest would probably be Ultra Scope. This one you have to like look for a question block using a little telescope thing. Sometimes it can be a little bit tricky to find it, and I think that's the highest like stakes and intensity these micro games really get. And then as for a runner-up, I think the only one that I feel like somewhat could warrant it is the WarioWare series one, where you have to hold out a stack of WarioWare like games without them falling. Although even then, I don't think this one's that bad. It's a bit more tricky when you get it in like all mixed up or super hard or something, where you're getting every micro game. But once you realize that this is the only micro game from 9 volts that uses Gift Giver, you kind of just know to anticipate that you should just stay still whenever you're told to take that form for his stage. Lastly is Volcano Wario. I'm only going to be talking about the brand new micro game, since this one also brings back Wario micro games from the first stage, but a bit tougher. I think the hardest is probably rock, paper, scissors. Not that playing rock, paper, scissors is hard, but just that you kind of have to win. And it's like weirdly hard to do. I don't know. Like you kind of have to think quickly of like how to win rock, paper, scissors. And like, I don't know, it just takes a little bit of brain juices compared to some of the other micro games. I think my run-up would probably be the Party of Question Mark. This one just has you reading out like your party size for a restaurant. But I find I always just messed up because I'm stupid, and I'll always just think about like not myself, and I'll put up like one less person because I forget that I should be included, and then I lose and I'm like, well, that's embarrassing. But that one, I guess it's just because of the quick think, you don't realize like, oh man, I'm supposed to count myself. But I think that tends to be a common reason for me to mess up on that one. So then lastly, I think that just leaves me with like my final ranking to give which one is the hardest. So I'm gonna kind of go rapid fire through like the bottom, and then once we hit top 3, I'll probably give a bit more explanation. So from probably like last to 4th would be Helping Hands, The Way I Like It, Press the Advantage, Ultra Scope, Rock, Paper, Scissors, Oscilloscope, Cake Flower, and Pure Waddle as 4th. And then for my final 3, I think I give Air Guitars 3rd. It just tends to be a bit tricky, and with all the mix of the buttons, the motion control tends to mess me up a lot. That being said, I think you can practice it a bit more, and that's why I think it's a bit easier in my opinion, as much even compared to my final 2. Second place, I'm going to just give to Teeter Trays. This one's a bit harder to practice, as it can be a bit random, and as I said, the motion controls tend to be really sensitive on this one, that it is pretty easy to choke up on this one and end up losing by result. I don't think it's more I don't really qualify it as like a motion control thing when it does feel a bit more deliberate rather than something the motion controls just straight up failing, in my opinion, if that makes any sense. And then that leaves me with one left, and in my opinion, the hardest micro game in WarioWare Move It would be Caught in the Act. Yay, I guess. I don't know. This is such a silly nothing burger discussion, but that's what this channel's about, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. It's a little tricky to master. I think I've only gotten this one once. I was like, oh my god, I did it. This one always messes me up when I get it. It's so darn hard. I don't know why. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm just not good at catching eggs, but that's it. This was such a silly video to make, but I had a lot of fun recording it and researching WarioWare games for this. I'm a sucker for WarioWare, so if you found this funny or enjoyable or just entertaining to really figure out which one of them is hard when the bar's so low, then let me know in the comments if you agree, if you disagree, if this is your first time hearing about WarioWare, if you've been a fan for years. Let me know. But as I said, that's everything, and yeah, I'll see you next week for the next video. Bye bye.